Right, good evening and welcome to Kinship Carers UK. And our special guest tonight at our community cafe is the wonderful Sarah. Sarah,
Oh,
would you like
thank you.
to introduce yourself, please?
I will, thank you. So this is me. I'm Sarah Dillon. I'm a therapist, a psychotherapist. I work with children and young people who have histories of trauma and neglect. Sadly, some of the most traumatised children in the country. I'm the Director of Therapeutic Services at the National Association of Therapeutic Parents and the Centre of Excellence in Child Trauma. So I head up the therapeutic services there. I'm a DDP-informed practitioner. That's a Dan Hughes approach, dyadic developmental psychotherapy. I'm an EMDR therapist, play therapist, and a havening practitioner, which again is another form of neuroscience. I'm a former fostered child. I had 4 foster homes, 4 children's homes. I was in and out of care. I also spent some time living with an aunt and uncle. And very sadly, the uncle I lived with we've got his funeral on Monday, so it's quite a big time for me.
Oh,
So I'm an attachment consultant for numerous independent foster agencies. I head up the therapeutic service at 2 therapeutic fostering agencies in the UK, one in England, another in Wales. I'm a co-author of a number of therapeutic parenting books alongside Sarah Nash. Just finished my own book, will hopefully will be published very soon. I'm a former panel chair, an international keynote speaker, etc., etc. My greatest claim to fame is that none of my own 4 children have ended up in the care system. And I really do thank my last foster mum for that in many ways, because I think without her love and guidance and commitment and stickability, I'm not sure where I would be now. So that's a little bit about me, a real lived experience. Now, I am aware that you're carers, and I'm also aware that you're not foster parents. However, I wrote this for foster parents, so please bear with me if the words don't quite fit your situation. Trauma is trauma, and it really doesn't matter where the child is living. The point of the matter is that they've experienced early life trauma. So that's what we're going to be thinking about today when we think about our teens. So before we can truly understand why we need to use therapeutic parenting when caring for children from trauma, we first need to understand why they behave differently to their neurotypical peers or securely attached children. I'm sure that you've had lots of training in this area, but I think it's always important to briefly revisit these things because it sets the stage when considering how we work with our tweens and teens. I often say it's not because a child won't behave in a certain way, it's because they can't. And I think that's a very important thing for us to remember. That lack of attachment in early childhood, or where there are attachment wounds, absolutely leads to an impairment in the part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. And that is responsible for reasoning, judgment, and impulse control. It's like driving a car without any brakes. It's also responsible for reflecting on your behaviour, for sitting and thinking about how your behaviour impacts on other people, for linking cause and effect, so linking your behaviour to an outcome. The ability to have empathy for your future self, as well as others around you. The ability to concentrate and to work hard at school and to learn properly. All of these activities and necessary ways of being in the world are impaired for our children from trauma because they've had such a hard time trying to just survive in the world. And so they're already not got a very good foundation upon which to build. So one of the most important things that I felt I wanted to include in the presentation was the importance of intersubjectivity. An easier way of understanding is attunement, where we are open to influence to each other. With a baby, baby's open to influence from us, and we're open to influence from them. We delight in each other. When we have a baby, we delight in those children. We interpret the baby's behaviour because the only way a baby can communicate is via behaviour. We identify the needs the baby communicates they have. We meet the needs and we develop a narrative. And what that means is we help the child to understand what they are telling us. So when they get older, they can start to use words. So it looks like this. So I want you to imagine this is a baby. It is actually a teddy, believe it or not. And this baby is crying. And I'm going to be saying, oh dear, I think you're hungry. Or I think you're tired. Oh dear, I think you're a bit sad. Did you like that? Was that funny? Yes, it was. Any bum sniffers? Yeah. You've done a poo. Yes, you have. And we use the mother-ese voice or the father-ese voice. We're saying to the baby, although I'm an adult and I'm a great big giant, I won't hurt you. And so this baby now feels safe with us and is open to this relationship, this attuned relationship. The only way a baby can communicate is via behaviour. A baby cannot say to us, do you know what, Granny, I really do need a bottle right now. You can't do that. So a baby's behaviour communicates three very important things. First and foremost, the baby communicates what it needs. Secondly, the baby communicates how it's feeling, emotionally, physically, psychologically, and sensory needs. And thirdly, the baby communicating what they are experiencing in their environment. And it's our job to figure out what is the baby saying to me, to interpret that behaviour, to identify what they're saying, to meet the need, and to let the baby know. And then as they get older, they move out of using behaviour and they start to use words. And they're able to say, Nanny, I need the toilet. Unless they're stressed, and then they regress and they go back to using behaviour, and then we have to meet them where they're at. My own youngest granddaughter recently, she was like a foghorn in a bucket, you know, she was like this. Oh, and I was thinking, oh, you're driving me mad. I can't wait for your mum to pick you up. But I didn't say that. I said, oh dear, I think you're tired. Oh, I'm not tired, Nanny, I'm not. I think, oh, I'm not tired. Stop saying I'm tired, Nanny. I said, okay, darling, you come and sit right here next to Nanny. Then within seconds, yeah, of course she wasn't tired. So we use that with children naturally all the time in figuring out what they're saying to us via their behaviour. And the other thing, as you've probably found out lots of times, is that 90% of brain development happens during this time, where thousands of connections per second called synapses are formed in the baby's developing brain through this relationship. Now, we do, though, know that certain things get in the way of this relationship, and we could talk about lots and lots of those things. But for me, one of the big things that's getting in the way of this relationship are blinking mobile phones, where we've got parents on a mobile phone all the time. Do you know mobile phones do not grow brains? So that's me having a little dig about the fact that I think mobile phones should be banned for under 16s, but that's my opinion. So also, a baby cannot self-regulate, which means they cannot calm themselves down. So no matter how much we say to a baby, calm down, Johnny, he can't. So they have to experience co-regulation, which is where the baby is mostly regulated by a regulated adult. And this helps the baby as they get older to be able to self-regulate. So can't regulate, co-regulate, self-regulate. In other words, the ability to self-soothe and calm themselves. So how many of our children have not had this sufficiently in the first 4 years of life? Sufficiently being the operative word. I'm not suggesting they haven't had it at all, but how many have not had it sufficiently? And sadly, if they have experienced neglect for a whole remit of reasons, then they're going to be stuck in a situation where they are stuck using behaviour. This is the most important part of the presentation. They are stuck using behaviour to communicate. And if you think about communication as a pie chart, 70% of the way in which securely attached adults communicate is via behaviour. 30% of the way in which securely attached adults communicate is verbally, and 7% of that 30 are words. So a very small amount of the way in which we communicate is via words. With babies, 100% of the way in which babies communicate is via behaviour. Remember, the behaviour communicates what they need, how they feel, and what they're experiencing. Children who have experienced neglect, children who have developmental trauma, 90 to 95% of the way in which they communicate is via behaviour. Therefore, their behaviour is their loudest voice. And sadly, for some of our children, their behaviour is their only voice. And what is their behaviour saying? Again, one of three things. Number one, their unmet needs, what they've not had. Number two, how they feel emotionally, physically, psychologically, and the sensory needs. And number three, what they've been through, trauma. So our children are stuck using behaviour to communicate how they feel, what they need, and what they've been through. And furthermore, they cannot self-regulate. So they're already in a really difficult situation before anything else happens. So as I said, behaviour is my loudest voice, and sometimes it is my only voice. So we've got to figure out, what is this child saying to me rather than what are they doing to me? This is a brain scan of a 6-year-old boy who experienced severe neglect and abuse in the first 2 years of his life. The areas in red show where the brain is not functioning normally. And as we can see, the orbital frontal cortex, the thinking cap, top part of the brain, is very atrophied, underdeveloped, not working properly. And so I spoke to somebody who worked for Bruce Perry over in the States, and she said to me that this child is now an adult. But this picture was taken when he was 6, this scan, and he was actually adopted at 2 by therapeutic parents. So he's already had 4 years of really good parenting, and his brain still looks like this. I wonder what his brain looked like when he first came into care. So this is very important for us to understand, because when we look at our children, they look like everybody else. When we look at our teenagers, we think, well, just the same as others, but they're not. To all intents and purposes, their brains are in a wheelchair in some instances. What I mean by that is their brains function differently. I was one of these teens. I can assure you it really is like driving a car without any brakes. I've got a big scar here where I put my fist through a window when I was 15, because I didn't stop and think, I'm going to cut myself badly and end up in hospital, which is what happened. There will be blood everywhere. I will break the window. There were people downstairs that could have been injured by it. I've caused criminal damage. I've frightened people. I didn't think any of that. All I felt was extreme anger because my mother had not turned up for contact, or what we called access back then. And I reacted in that fashion. So our children are egocentric. Children from trauma do not think that what their parents have done is wrong, or that their parents are bad in any way. They believe that they are. I'm not here to suggest whether parents are bad or not. I'm here to talk about the impact on the child. So unfortunately, all children are egocentric. All young children, toddlers and under. So they don't think about how the world impacts on them. They think about how they impact on the world. And because of that, our children felt that they didn't impact well on the world being their parents, because if they had have done, their parents would have responded to them in a way that made them feel good about themselves. So when our children's needs are met in a consistent, predictable and reliable fashion, our children develop a positive internal working model. And what that means is, it means how they feel about themselves on the inside and how that plays out in their relationship with their primary caregivers, i.e. yourselves. So children who've experienced trauma, and in particular neglect, have a negative view of self, a negative internal working model. And so if this child was a jigsaw puzzle, on each piece of the puzzle we would find words written that how they feel about themselves. These are things that children have said to me. I can't, I'm not good enough, I'm bad, I'm a failure, I'm unlovable, I'm vile, I'm disgusting, I'm unworthy, I'm useless, it's all my fault, and you won't want me. So when we come along with this lovely piece of puzzle here and we say, don't say that about yourself, Johnny, you're a lovely boy. Of course, it's the wrong piece of jigsaw and it fractures the whole puzzle, which is why you might find when you say to your child, don't say that about yourself, you're a lovely boy or a lovely girl, you get a big reaction from them, because in their world, it's not true. Now, of course, we're not going to collude with this, but what we are going to do is validate them and say, it must be so hard to feel that way about yourself. I can't imagine what it feels to feel like it's all your fault. I'm going to work hard to help you to see that I see you differently. And this is a very important point to make when we think about our teens, because there's a lot of this unprocessed sense of shame and responsibility that permeates their very soul and is often at the root of a lot of the very tricky behaviours that we might see. So our children are fearful of intimacy. Intimacy, into me you see. If you see into me, what will you see? I'm bad, vile, disgusting, unlovable, rotten to the core. So their fear of connection, because they believe they're too bad, they don't deserve it. They can experience self-hatred, which could lead to self-harming. Sabotage. You do something really nice for them, extremely ungrateful, and they ruin it. There's that push-pull relationship. They love you, they hate you, they love you, they hate you. Very fragile attachments. No real sense of belonging, and a false sense of loyalty, even to people who have abused them. I just want to reiterate, I'm not suggesting they've been abused, but some of our children have. So I just wanted to make it very clear that they can even be loyal to people who've caused them significant harm. So they have faulty neuroception. I've just been writing about this recently. Neuroception is a subconscious system for detecting threat. So let's say, for example, a child has lived with domestic abuse, and then they move into live with you, and you might find that they befriend somebody in the family who they think could become a potential abuser. So let's say, for example, there was a violent male in the family before coming to live with you. You might find they befriend the male in your home because they're trying to keep that person on side. So they're perceiving threat where there is none. It's like a faulty smoke detector that's going off when there's no smoke. For example, particularly with teens, you might find that they perceive a neutral face as a hostile face. You might find with your teen that you say something in a strong way. For example, please could you put your stuff away, love? Please could you put that away? And they accuse you of shouting. Why do you shout at me all the time? You're always shouting at me. And you haven't raised your voice at all, but they're perceiving this threat where there is none. And many families say, we can't get it, we don't understand it, no matter what we do, they're always on the defence. And that's because there's smoke detectors going off all the time. So these are the common warning signs of developmental trauma, if you like, symptoms of children who have experienced early life trauma and, most importantly, neglect. So you might have a child who is superficially engaging and charming, lacking eye contact on parental terms. What I mean by that is on your terms. Indiscriminately affectionate with strangers. They love the lady in Tesco's as much as they love you. Not affectionate on your terms. Destructive of self, others and material things. Cruel to animals. Stealing, or what I call taking. Self-harming. Defiance, rudeness, control and being obnoxious. Forgetfulness. Risk-taking. Aggression and tantrums. Lying about the obvious, crazy lying. That's like saying, I've not got a mobile phone in my hand, you liar. No impulse control, frequently acting hyperactive. Learning delays, lack of cause and effect thinking, so they do something without thinking about the consequence. Lack of conscience, empathy and compassion. Abnormal eating patterns, they're usually addicted to sugar and high carbohydrate foods. Poor peer relationships, that's if they've got any mates, and they are often fair weather friends, so they change their friends with their socks, or they try to own their friends. Incessant chatter and nonsense questions. What time's dinner? What time's dinner? What time's tea? What's the purpliest purple you've ever seen? And where does an itch go when you scratch it? Or the best one is like this. So you're driving along in your lovely car, and all of a sudden the child says, Nanny? Yes, love. Are we in the car? Yes, love, we're in the car. Absolute crazy questions. And also poo and wee issues, lots of poo and wee problems. Absconding, in other words, running away, still my favourite behaviour that I've held on to for years, and issues with transitions. Sadly, when children have lots and lots of these issues, particularly if they are in the care system, they will move from one home to another because people can't cope with them. But when you are a kinship carer, where are you going to move them to? Where are you going to put them? And so our kinship carers, something happened yesterday. I'm going to tell you about it. So Sarah Nation and I, who wrote the Edited Therapeutic Parenting, we spoke at a big conference yesterday in Wrexham. We did another one today. Yesterday was parents, so adopters, foster parents, kinship carers, people with kids on SGOs. They came yesterday, and today we spoke to social workers, trying to get social workers to actually do things properly. So yesterday I said to Sarah, I can point out to you who's an adopter, who's a foster parent, and who's a kinship carer. She said, so can I. So as people came in and sat down, about 40 people, I was like, that's an adopter, that's a foster parent, that's a kinship carer. And you know, we could tell the difference, and I'll tell you how. Because the adopters look well together and lovely clothes and really well turned out and quite okay, a bit emotional. The foster parents look worn out. They look like they've got invisible tar stuck to them. And the kinship carers came in on their knees. I'm telling you the truth here. They came in on their knees. Sorry, I find it really upsetting. They came in on their knees. And Sarah and I said, that's because the adopters don't have to fight the system in the same way. I'm not saying they don't, but not in the same way all the time. And they've got far more things they can do with their children. They're not as restricted. The foster parents definitely have to fight the system. However, you know, they are often rewarded financially for it. And I work very hard with foster parents, and some of them are amazing, amazing people, but they are fighting the system. And the kinship carers are just left swimming in a pool of despair. And we want to change that. We really want to see those changes happen. So, but if the child is in the care system and this is happening, this level of behaviours, what usually happens is they're chucked around the care system, which is what happened to me. Chucked around the care system like a second-hand fridge, and they have the audacity of calling the children placements. How dare they do such a thing? And so often the children will end up in a children's home. And in many children's homes, and I've worked in quite a few, I can tell you, a lot of the caregivers there, the support staff, are only a couple of years older than the kids. So they're not going to respond well to them. And it's like a revolving door. So they're often just a holding place just to keep them quiet until they leave care. And then what is the trajectory of their lives? Well, sadly, often they end up in drugs and alcohol addictions, homelessness, mental health problems, and sadly, often their own children end up in the care system. So it really isn't a good trajectory for their lives. So I want us to think again about these issues here and these signs. And I'm going to ask you another question. Are toddlers superficially engaging and charming? Yes. Can toddlers lack eye contact on parental terms? Yes. Can toddlers be indiscriminately affectionate with strangers? Yes. Can toddlers not be affectionate on parents' terms? Yes. Can toddlers be destructive of self other than material things? Absolutely. Can they be cruel to animals? Do they pull the cat's tail and pinch the dog's ear? Yes. A few weeks ago, a friend of mine's granddaughter put a pencil in the dog's bottom. Do toddlers steal? Yes. Go to Asda and you'll come home with a tangerine and potato in the pushchair. Do toddlers self-harm? Yes, maybe not with intent, but they'll bang their heads off things and they pick scabs and put fingers in doors and fires. Are toddlers defiant, rude, obnoxious and controlling? Yes. Are toddlers forgetful? Yes, they live in the land of now. They don't think about yesterday, tomorrow, last night, this week, next week and today. Just the moment. Can toddlers be aggressive and add tantrums? Yes, particularly in Asda. Do toddlers lie about the obvious, crazy lying? Yes. My youngest granddaughter thinks she's Princess Anna and she lives in a castle. Well, number one, she's black and Princess Anna's white and she lives in a council house. You little liar. I am not going to put in an application to camps to see someone with purple hair and funny shoes who don't know what they're talking about, because quite frankly, it's a 39-year waiting list anyway, and you won't meet the threshold. Do toddlers have problems with impulse control? Yes, they do. Do toddlers have learning delays? Yes, they do. And if I had a toddler in here now, they'd be grabbing the laptop, my cup of tea and all that stuff. Do toddlers lack cause and effect thinking? Yes. They jump in muddy puddles without putting their wellies on. Do toddlers lack conscience, empathy, and compassion? Yes. Tell your toddler that the dog's died and they'll still want a biscuit. Do toddlers have abnormal eating patterns? Yes, they're fussy eaters. Do they have poor peer relationships? Have they learned to share nicely? No, they haven't. Do toddlers do incessant chatter and nonsense questions? Yes, they do. Do they have problems with poo and wee? Yes, they do. And do they abscond? Absolutely. Guess where? As the car park. And do they have issues with transitions? Absolutely. Try and take them out of soft play when they're having a nice time and they have the screaming abdabs. So when a toddler does all of this, we go, oh, bless. Oh. But when a 15-year-old's doing it, think, oh my gosh, we need a referral to CAMS, they're a psychopath. No, they're not. They're stuck using their behaviour to show you what they've not had, how they feel, and what they've been through. Any unprocessed trauma, which means bad things that have happened to me that I've not yet made sense of, and any unmet developmental needs, all the things you need from 0 to 4 that haven't been met in our children, in the teens, it will come to the surface. Because the child, if the child was a house, you're just about to put a roof on its head and you've still got all these unmet needs. So I wrote a poem, because I write loads and loads of poems, and this poem is called Teens in Care. Being a teen is sodding hard work. I'm always accused of being a jerk. They say that I'm grumpy, selfish and bad, and no one takes time to realise I'm sad. You see that I'm growing, yet inside I'm small. I cannot behave, so I'm kicked out of school. I'm constantly told that I must act my age, but I am still stuck at the toddler stage. My early life needs are remaining unmet. All I can see is the world is a threat to my safety and need to survive. I find it far better to stay here and hide. I hide in my bedroom out of the way, living in games for most of the day. Virtual reality is now my new home, or spending 6 hours glued to my phone. I want to avoid this growing up bit, but everyone thinks I'm an ignorant git. I'll pull up my hoodie when I venture downstairs to block out the noise of your tutting and your glares. If only you knew how truly I'm feeling, the pain in my heart would leave you all reeling with guilt that you wish you had known why I escape in my Xbox and phone. You always remind me of what I've done wrong. I'll soon be 18 and we'll need to move on. They told you, the local authority, to teach me independence skills, but all that we have are a battle of wills. Are they so stupid they can't understand? I'm still just a toddler, but my body a man. Until you've met my early life needs, I cannot move on and I cannot succeed. Pushed down a road that I truly can't face, expected to enter the adulthood race, getting a job and running a home. Perhaps now you know where I hide in my phone. I want to avoid leaving this place. I know I'm a failure and an utter disgrace. How can they put me out in society? Just a mere thought gives way to anxiety. When it all goes wrong, they won't give a shite. I'll be out the system and no one will fight to get me the help that I should have had then to stop toddlers living as if they are men. So the most important thing I can say to you tonight is think toddler. That's where a lot of this is coming from. Unmet needs and unprocessed trauma. So I've just read you that Teen in Care poem. So how old is your child, biologically, chronologically, the child you were looking after? Maybe the child's 14, but how old is that child developmentally? If they've experienced early life trauma and in particular neglect, they're going to be at least half the chronological age and sometimes even younger than that. And how old is your child experientially, i.e. what they've been through? Adult. So you will find that your child moves between gangster granny and a toddler. And they move in between those two parts of self most of the time. And it's so difficult when you're looking after such young people because you honestly don't know where you stand for 1 minute of the day to another. So think about all the things they've not had between the ages of 0 to 4, or they've not had sufficiently. And if an unmet need remains unmet until it's met, if there were holes with cups in, how many holes would their cup have? And when you try and fill it with your wonderful love and care and kindness and acceptance and all the other fabulous thing you give them, it all pours out. Because unfortunately, cups with holes in don't hold water very well. So we've got to really be able to go back before we can come forward. I've nearly finished. I'm very well known for the saying, an unmet need remains unmet until it's met. We've got to plug developmental holes and gaps. allow our children to regress and redo what wasn't done when they were little, meet unmet needs, and repair developmental ruptures. So what happens with teens is this. When they come to live with you, let's say the child is 8 when the child came to live with you, and you start caring for the child as an 8-year-old and, you know, engaging them in things that 8-year-olds do, buying toys for 8-year-olds, taking them to 8-year-old outings and I can't think of what the word is, activities. And, you know, they're in a class for other 8-year-olds, year 2 and year 3, and their friends are other 8-year-olds. But you find it's really tricky, but you bumble along. Bumble along means you kind of get on with it. It's a bit difficult, but you manage. I call that the green zone. If you were building a house, there's the green zone. You can keep going. And then they reach the tweens, which is when they're reaching puberty and they're just starting to get lumps and bumps and a bit of hair in interesting places. And you're now in the amber zone. And when you're in the amber zone, you start to find that things start to get trickier. Things are starting to, you know, things are starting to uptick. Behaviours are on the increase. And you think, what's going on here? Why is this so tricky now? And then you might start to think, well, it's just they're becoming teens. It's all hormones. And with neurotypical teens, it may well be. I mean, you still see some regression in neurotypical teens, i.e. securely attached teens, but not in the same way as children from trauma, nowhere near. It's like comparing a Tonka truck to an articulated lorry. There's no comparison between teenagers who've not experienced trauma and those who have. And so if you don't get some serious support in very quickly, then you're going to go into the red zone. And the red zone is usually around that magical age of about 15, when things really start to go Pete-tong. Stuff gets very, very tricky. And that's because subconsciously, intrinsically, the child knows you're just about to put a roof on my house. And when you put a roof on a house with no firm foundation, it all starts to crumble. So we've got to underpin our teens. And it's much better if we can do that when they're very young, to start this work when they're young. And so in order to go forward, you have to come back. The most important thing I'm trying to put across here is that the behaviour is telling you they've got all these unmet needs. They're reaching a certain age where independence is inevitable. They want to fit in with their peers, but unfortunately they are developmentally many years behind, but experientially many years forward. So they're really caught between a rock and a very hard place. And for you, it is relentless. It is so hard and so difficult. So it gets unprocessed trauma and unmet developmental needs surface in the teens. That's why it gets harder during adolescence. There's a pruning of the brain. So the neural pathways in the brain that are no longer necessary, that they needed when they were very little children, start to be pruned. The pleasure and reward-seeking part of the brain in all teenagers is about 70 times larger and more active than when they're younger, and even more so in children from trauma. Most teens will enter into a risk-taking stage to one degree or another, but when it is a child with developmental trauma who cannot link cause and effect, it is significant. There's a lot of risk-taking. Seeking independence, but not being emotionally ready for independence. And if they enter into relationships, they get a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever, you find they are so dependent on that person to meet all their unmet attachment needs. And therefore they become very vulnerable, and an increased likelihood in a family breakdown because this all becomes so difficult for you. So the essentials of therapeutic parenting, this is the last slide I'm going to use and then we can go to questions, is that our kids need routine, structure and boundaries. Now you might say to me, well, they won't stick to the boundaries and they won't stick to the structure, they won't stick to the routine. But where possible, you need to ensure that that still continues. Our children need consistency, predictability and reliability. You have to be the unassailable safe base. Nothing in you needs to change. If you let your yes be yes and your no be no, you're in charge. Someone said to me, what's it like being chucked around the care system? It was like walking along the edge of a cliff wearing a blindfold, until my last foster mum became the wall at the side of my cliff. We used to call her Mount Kilimanjaro because she could not be moved. And the most comforting words to me were, I have decided. When she said she'd decided, it wouldn't matter what you said or did, she didn't change in her mind. And if you did break the boundary, then the consequence was as a result of a choice you'd made. So, for example, we didn't have mobile phones when I was young because I'm old. But if we had it done and I'd have smashed it, which is what I did with most things, she wouldn't have been running out and replacing it. The natural consequence would have been phone's broken. Logical consequence, I'm going to have to do quite a few jobs to earn the money to get a new one. But with nurture. We use instructions opposed to requests to minimise defiance and control. So you might say to your teenager, Johnny, it's time to put your stuff away now. Time to come off your computer. I'm not coming off it, you fat idiot. Oh, that's a shame because there's going to be less time for X, Y, and Z later. I can see you're not managing your mobile phone very well. Top tip, do not say you're not listening, you're not doing as you're told, you're misbehaving, you're being naughty. What you need to say is you're not managing. I can see you're not managing very well, because if someone's not managing, then they need help to manage. I can see you're not managing to handle, giving mobile phones to teens from trauma is like giving a toddler a mobile phone. They can't manage them. But if that's what they've got, because they don't want to feel left out with their peers, the mobile phones are the bane of your life. I can tell you that for nothing. However, if they do have one, they need to be seen that they can manage it well. If they're struggling to manage it, you might have to look after it for a little while until you can see they can manage it better. It's all in the managing, you see. It's important that you keep the relationship with your teen intact, always. So you might say, I'm not happy about X, Y, and Z, but you know what? I still love you. I still care about you. We're still family, and we're still going shopping, but I am upset about A, B, and C. But you have to remind them the relationship with you is intact and nothing's going to change in their world, even though you're upset. So we use empathic commentary. I can see you're struggling with that. I think you might be struggling with that because of. We name the need, the gift of why. So I might say to a child, I've noticed that you are really angry with your granddad. And I think that you find it very difficult to be around men because of what happened with your dad when you were younger. That's how I work with them. We're helping the child to understand it's not me, it's what's happened to me. It helps to dilute the internal working model. It helps a child to realise that they're not bad kids, but what they've been through has caused the problem. Connection at all times, regular relationship repair, letting them know whatever's going on, I still love you. And natural and logical consequences. One last thing. I want you to think about a bungee jumping teen. What do I mean by that? I want you to imagine that you live on the top of a cliff. You and your family on the top of the cliff. And your teen is interested in what's going on at the bottom of the cliff. And at the bottom of the cliff are things like drugs and alcohol, teenage pregnancy, county lines, CSC, undesirable people you don't want them to mix with, and all that jazz at the bottom of the cliff. And your child jumps off the cliff regularly and goes down to the bottom and gets involved in all this stuff. And you're there trying to hold them by a rope to stop them jumping. And what happens is you're cutting your hand while you're holding that rope, or they'll pull you off the cliff with them. So what you need is a bungee jump. So what you don't do is this. Keep phoning them, keep texting them, threatening stuff, taking everything off them so you've got nothing left to take, getting in great big arguments. It's a pointless exercise. What you need to do is give them a different response. What they are looking for is a sense of belonging. And they are really after that next thing that makes them get a bit of a high, a bit of an adrenaline rush. So what's important, that even if you're really worried and you're really cross, when they come home, so this is what my foster mum did. I used to run off all the time on Streatham Common in London, always running off. I used to love being chased by coppers. It was great fun. But she had this rule: if you're not back in the house by 12, whatever bush you've crawled out from under, go and crawl back underneath it or something along those lines. So I rush him to get back before 12. I was meant to be back ages before that. And I'd open the door and she'd say, I've been worried sick about you. Where have you been? I phoned the coppers and all that stuff. Anyway, on this particular occasion, I've knocked the door. And she opened the door and she said, thank you, Jesus. I said, what? And she said, I'm so glad you're okay. What? I've been worried sick about you. She said, I'm so happy you're all right. Oh my gosh, have I missed you tonight? I'm thinking she's mad. Then she said, your dinner's in the kitchen, you'll have to warm it up. Now, in those days, we did not have microwaves. So you'd put it on top of a saucepan with a tin lid and it congealed gravy. But anyway, I ate it nonetheless. And I still remember sitting on my bed thinking, why is she having a go at me? Why is she not shouting at me? But the next morning, she was giving it large around how tired she was. Oh, really yawned. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give you a lift to school today because I'm so tired. There's no way I can drive because it'd be dangerous. You're going to have to walk. Walk, I said. It's about 4 miles, I know. Well, can I have the bus fare? I'm so unfortunate, darling. I haven't got any bus fare because I've had to use that money to pay someone to do the ironing because I don't want to burn myself where I'm so tired. I can tell you now, I stopped running away in the end because what I was looking for at the bottom of the cliff was at home. Give them a different experience of you. And I want to promise you something. They do grow out of it, you know. They do come through the other side, but they come through the other side when they know they've got you right there beside them. So that's all I want to say to you. It took me a lot longer than I thought, so sorry about that.
Thank you, Sarah. That was absolutely wonderful. We really, really do appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
It's so helpful. And